So for understanding the data, the first thing that I want you to do, the first step, is to identify the MP. Now, what is the MP? MP stands for the noun phrase. And if you remember from the first lesson in this series, the question has a written component and then the visual component. In the written component, we have two parts. We have the description and the instructions. The description is the part that we're interested in right now. And the description, if you recall, follows the structure of subject, verb, MP. So the subject is usually the type of chart. So the line graph, right? That could be the subject. The pie charts in this example is the subject. Then we have a verb. This verb is usually something like shows, describes, indicates, depicts, illustrates, right? These are the types of verbs. Here, in this case, we have show. So these pie charts, or the pie charts below, show. Now, what do they show? This is very important. We need to see what the question is saying the data represents. So in this case, the noun phrase is the popularity of different sports among male and female athletes in a small Australian town. Now, we've identified the MP. It's the phrase beginning with the popularity of, all the way towards town. But what is the NP core? And by NP core, I mean a noun in the noun phrase that best represents what these numbers are representing. I'll tell you what I mean. Look, in this pie chart, the one on the left representing male athletes, as it says here, we have 26%. Okay, 26% of what? Is it 26% of basketball players who were male? Or is it 26% of athletes play basketball? What am I missing in each of these cases? Now you see, in both of my examples, something went wrong. And we'll later see what went wrong. But the sentences that I just shared with you don't accurately represent what these pie charts are showing. But if we look closely at the MP, and we realize that it's basically the percentage of male and female athletes. So the MP core in this case is athletes. Now you might be wondering, okay, fine, but how is this important? Well, it's important because later when we are writing our report, we know that whenever we say 26%, we are referring to 26% of male or female athletes. If you misidentify this MP core, chances are you might write a report which you think represents what this data is showing, but in fact, it's showing something else. I'll show you what I mean with a few more examples. But for now, suffice it to say that after looking at the subject, verb, and MP, we've identified the word athletes as the core of this MP. Okay, step 2. What you need to do is I want you to notice the features of the chart. There are certain features of charts that we need to very consciously pay attention to and look at the information surrounding them. These are, quite specifically, the axes. So, for example, if you have a line graph, I want you to look at the vertical axis, and then I want you to look at the horizontal axis and ask yourself, what is being shown in this vertical axis? What is being demonstrated through the horizontal axis? So I want you to be conscious of what these axes are showing. If you have a table, you don't have axes anymore. So instead, I want you to focus on the columns and the rows. What are the columns showing? What are the rows representing? And so knowing what is shown in each case can really help you better understand the data. Another feature that I want you to look at is the scale. So a lot of the time we have numbers, right? So we have 2, 4, 6, 8. But it's not 2, 4, 6, 8 students. It's actually 2,000, 4,000, 6,000, and 8,000 students. And just because we didn't pay attention to the information surrounding the scale, we may have come up with numbers that aren't accurate. So if I write a report, and in my report I keep talking about how 2 students increased to 4 students, whereas it was actually 2,000 students increasing to 4,000 students, this is a very critical error on my part, and it's going to cost me dearly. So just by paying a few seconds of attention to these features, you can ensure that you're not making mistakes such as the one that I just described. Another aspect, another feature of the report that I want you to pay attention to is what we call the key. So the key basically means any written information that can help us better understand the chart. So for example, if you've seen old maps, you'll notice there's a legend accompanying the map. Also, those of you who work with charts and graphs know that the term legend is used for any piece of information that will help us understand or interpret the information in the chart. So for example, sometimes you have a little key that says the color black represents, for instance, international students, and the color white represents domestic students, right? So these two colors that we have are shown it's clear what is being displayed and what is being represented by these two colors. So far we've looked at the axes, which is something you need to identify in the case of line graphs and bar charts. We've looked at columns and rows, which is something that you need to be mindful of when you're dealing with a table. We have looked at scales, which could really appear in any kind of chart, really. And we've also looked at the key, which is any type of descriptive guide information that the chart has provided to us. And if you're dealing with a pie chart, such as in this example, I just want you to read any information. So for example, here we have percentage of male athletes. You can consider that as a key. Or the percentage of female athletes. Again, it's helping us distinguish these two pie charts from one another. Or we have the names of the sports that they are engaged in, right? So this is as far as we go. When it comes to flow charts and maps, that is qualitative data, we don't really have axes, columns, rows, scales, and a key. So instead, what I want you to do is describe what you see in your head. And this is going to help you determine whether you've understood everything. Now you might say, well, why can't I just figure it out as I'm writing? Well, that's because when you are writing, sometimes you've written like half of a paragraph and then you suddenly realize, or it dawns on you, that a certain aspect of your response is wrong. Now what? Are you going to go back and delete what you've written and rewrite it? Well, that's a waste of time. You could have, averted this situation by paying attention to all these features in advance. So my advice to you is to, if it's a qualitative chart, just describe the process in your head. Make sure you have it all figured out. If it's a quantitative chart, then I want you to pay attention to the axis, the columns and rows, the scale, and the key, as I mentioned. Now, step 3 is a really interesting step because it's like a litmus test. If you can successfully pass step 3, it means that you have this, you got this. You know what you're doing. And here's what I want you to do in step 3. I want you to randomly pinpoint a section of the chart and describe it in simple words. This is very important. You can even do it in your own language, because at this point, we're not interested in the language, grammar, vocabulary aspect of the writing process. We're mostly interested in, have you understood the chart? And it really doesn't matter if you've understood the chart in English or in your own language. Understanding that level of thinking, abstraction that we have in thinking, it doesn't really, relate to any language. So if you've understood it, it doesn't matter if you've, stated this sentence in your own language or in English. Let me show you what I mean. So first of all, try to be random, because if you choose a section that you think is easy to describe, then you're not really challenging yourself and you're not really helping with this step of the process. The real challenge is in suddenly, randomly choosing a given section of the chart and then being able to describe that section of the chart in simple words.